So, welcome. We are very excited to have everybody and to show off Vista 3 Release 3. It's been a long time coming. Um, been a lot of fixes that we've done, especially a lot of things in the background, things that were causing issues in the past that just needed to be fixed. We basically had to break things in order to fix things. So this is why this has been so long for this release. We feel very comfortable with it now. So this would be, we're kicking it off into our public beta today. It's been in private beta for a little while. We've been kicking the tires on it for a while. Um, so it all feels great, and we're happy to send it out there and see what you guys think about it. So to start off, let's go over a couple of things that are new in Vista in this build, just overall. Some of the basics. The first thing is it's got a new factory fixture library, so we'll have a lot more fixtures over in here. A lot of things that everyone's been requesting have been in the library for a little while, and we've just finally merged this into this build. Some of the other things that we've done is in the Mac OS version, Catalina is now officially supported. We never had a problem with Catalina. With Vista, it was always came down to the dongle driver. So the dongle driver now is rebuilt, put in there, and actually, for you Mac users, here's a screenshot of the new Mac installer. You'll notice that there is no extras folder anymore. This means you don't have to install that dongle driver by itself. It installs, it's detected, installs automatically. You also don't have the UD512 installer. This is using a new way of running the UD512, so there's no need to install anything else. You just drag Vista over in the applications and off you go. The further instructions are in the README file in here, so if you want to see, all the nuts and bolts. Now with Catalina, there are some more permissions you have to accept when you start Vista because it wants access to documents and network and things like that. So you have to go through a little bit more when you install Vista on there, just from the Mac OS side, but from the Vista side, it's pretty straightforward. All right. So that's one of the big things for Catalina. The other big item that's for both OSs is the USB handling for the console surfaces themselves has been completely redone. These connect a lot better on both all the consoles, both the legacy consoles and the new consoles. You'll see faster connections in there. You'll see more feedback when it's doing firmware updates. It works a lot nicer, and that was the big. That I'd say that was one of the biggest holdups with this build is getting that done, and getting that to the point where we all trusted it, and we're very happy the way it's working. So that was a big step. Also in this, we're going to launch the new user manual. So if everyone asking for the Vista 3 user manual, we finally have a beta version of the user manual. It's going to be posted on the forum along with this build. So we're planning on putting that up on the Vista forum this afternoon. So you have a link to the manual and the link to the builds and all that fun stuff. For anyone that's new to Vista, the Vista 3 is a free update to Vista 2. So if you already have Vista 2 and you have a dongle, you have a free update of that. And speaking of dongles, there's going to be a new Vista dongle special happening starting the 1st of September. 40% off on dongles. So if you're on the fence about getting one or you want to look at something, now's the time. And finally, as with any software update, even with this beta, even though I think this beta is probably more stable than a lot of the release versions out there, don't update right before a show. So if you have a show this weekend, I'd say wait till afterwards and then install it and play. So just so we don't have any, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you might have something go sideways on you. So, all right. So if, as everyone's noticed, probably here, the console, the Softkey Toolbar is at the bottom of the screen. This is a new preference for Vista 3. You can still dock it to the top. But in Vista R3, we decided to put it at the bottom for touchscreen. So if you have a touchscreen and you're reaching across, it's easier to grab buttons here. By default, it will be down here. So it does take a little bit of getting used to at times. I find myself looking around for these windows as well. But it's dockable to the top or bottom, so you can move it if you decide to. Some of the other little GUI items are, there's larger tabs for the layouts and for the features at the top here. We're in the process of making everything a lot more touchscreen friendly, so we'll see a lot more of that. You'll also notice that we have new items up here in the intensity. So there's a 0, 50, and 100. We got rid of the arrows on there. We have a +5 and a -5. These are actually user adjustable as to how far these increment. So in your user preferences, under the editing tab, you have the intensity increment amount here. So if you wanted to make that 10 and apply, you'll see in there that now you have a larger increment. So little things like that. For the position, we've added the pan and tilt sliders in the All Features tab. Previously, this is only in the Position tab. So now that's nice to have. This is one of those things that I certainly like because I use this a lot more. We got rid of the Favorites button because no one really used that. Kind of reorganize some things here. Another new thing that was added in here is you can release the events from this drop-down menu. So if you're building a queue list and you want to release everything, in the past you used to have to make a list, make an event in the timeline first, and then change it to a release event. Now you can just drop in a release event right from here. So just little things to speed up what you're doing with everything. Again, with moving lights in the different parameters that we have here, one of these little things that are probably huge to many people is when you have go into your beam tab, we're now defaulting to the focus tab instead of the framing tab. Again, something that was annoying to many people for a long time, and now we're back to having it in the focus tab by itself. So as for other changes in the GUI, one of the big things also is in the 6 screens of Vista, we pulled out the last screen of being the output window. You still have access to an output window if you absolutely need it. It's a dockable window. But we changed that last one to this new user configurable window. So this screen can be, it's just like what the external monitors were. It can be set up to be whatever you want. In this view, we've got 4 different fixture choosers, but I can get rid of them and add things as I see fit, like quick pickers, another output window if I needed it, playback windows, all this stuff. So now in the main application, you have a window that can do whatever you want it to do, depending on what you need. Some of the other little changes here too, we can set border colors on the quick picker items. So if you have items here, you right click on them and you go to change border color. And when you're in there, you can pick whichever color you want. So if you want to organize your different items by a border color, in the past, you know, these item colors are defined based on the type of component they are. So groups were this, presets were this, and on down the line. So now you can have a border color to further segregate those things based on what you need it to look like. Another much requested feature in the overall application of Vista is the increase font size and decrease font size. It also has a shortcut key of Control++. So now if we want to have larger fonts in your playback screens, we can have that, and we can see, you know, for the people that can't read it, we can see it nicely. As of right now, this is a global preference. It's not saved the show file. We're still working on tweaking some of that, but this is a great first step to having something that we've never been able to do in the past. So, and one of the other little things in the GUI under user preferences, we have the you can assign your own lock screen image. So our default lock screen image, let's see how this works when we do this in Zoom. So our default lock screen image. And if you wanted to have something different, you could go in and assign it here. And then if you need to clear it out, you can go back to just hitting the clear and it'll go back to the default. All right, so as I said, layout tabs have been made bigger, a little clearer. Other things that have been done in the fixture chooser itself, we now have some more feedback on these icons as to what's going on. So there's this little white circle around these icons now. That's actually feedback of what color they are in. So now you can previs what color fixtures are even when they're not selected. So I can see that, hey, these are set to green. The intensity is still down. There's also another little item here where we'll see that there's a gobo in the fixture. So we have this little I don't know what we call this gear, almost gear on the outside of there. It shows that there's something else in the beam. So it's a way to see, without the fixture intensity being on, that there's something there. Now the original stuff is still in there where we can see the gobo in there, and I have the intensity on in these things as well. So we still have all that. We just have a little bit more to it. Give me a sec here. Having this intensity or having this color ring has been quite handy, especially when you're running through effects or whatnot and you don't want to have the light on. You can kind of create a color effect in the background before it even comes on without having to select the fixtures and see how it's playing. So great little bits of feedback. Another fun one we have in here, by popular request, is the duplicate icon function. So now we can take a fixture, and if we have let's say we have two of these are twofered in the rig, we want to see it visually that we have them, we can right click and select duplicate icon, and now we have an identical copy of that icon. Whichever one I select, they're the same thing, so the intensity runs together. It's just another copy of it, and we can make more if we wanted to, if you wanted 3 furs or even down the line. To get rid of them, we just say remove duplicate icon. Oops. Remove, and they go away. So you can do this with fixtures or with groups if you need to have extra groups in there as well. So another highly requested feature. Also, what we have happen here is when we have a fixture, when we hover over a fixture, we can see that where it's patched. So we get a little feedback as to we're patched at dimmer or universe 4 address 1. We can take this a step farther by right-clicking on it and saying find in patch table. And that's going to take us over to the patch screen and take us right to that fixture. So great for finding stuff when you're trying to troubleshoot and figure out where you're at, especially if you've got a rig of lots of universes, lots of fixtures. While we're in the universe tab, we also have a new thing where we can relabel these universe tabs. A couple ways of going about this. I could go to patch, say label universe. And now I have it labeled. It's still going to tell me the number, so I can still see, which Vista universe it is. But now I can label these as different universes. Also, if you right-click in here, you can label the universe in the patch screen itself. And while we're sitting over in patch, we'll take a look at other little things here. So in Connect Universes, there's a new column here in the Connect Universes window that you're going to see. It's called Output Enabled. This allows you to enable or deactivate or disable an entire type of network data. So for example, if you wanted to patch your entire rig in ArtNet, but also patch it in Streaming ACN, but you only want to have one active at a time, we could turn off one, and it will turn off everything output for Streaming ACN or everything output for ArtNet. So it allows us a little bit extra flexibility. It was another requested thing for multi-console use. For consoles themselves, you'll never be able to turn off the outputs. The physical ports are always going to be enabled. So you'll always see an NA or not available on these. All right. Something else in the patch screen. When we have a moving light fixture selected, under transforms, we now have a invert encoders, so we can invert the pan encoder and tilt encoders. This is different from the invert pan and invert tilt of the fixture itself. This just inverts the encoder function itself. So Again, if your fixture is moving the way you want it, but your pan encoder is going backwards from what your brain is thinking, you can invert the encoder and make it work, more proper to you. And then while we're in this screen, we tweak the DMX view a little bit, both in this window and in the dockable window of DMX. It looks a little clearer as we can see which is the channel and which is the dimmer or the DMX value and things like that. So just a couple little things like that. We've also done some renaming changes in here. The strike and dowels macros have been renamed to lamp on and lamp off. Makes a little more sense for people. Also, if we're over looking at our Softkey toolbar, the open Softkey has been changed to edit. It makes more sense, so it's edit Q list, so we can see that. And then finally over here in tracking backup, the network, we used to be called network here. It had nothing to do with really networking. It was always about the tracking backup, so we've renamed it to tracking backup. So it makes more sense. Network preferences are still in user preferences where they've been. All right, so that's a lot of the GUI questions, or the GUI changes. You have any questions, anything there so far? Does it look like it? All right. So now we're going to move into some of the new rules of Vista. So we've done some stuff with the command line and how things open and close within QList and cycle through things to make it much more predictable. In the past, you never really knew what was going to happen sometimes when you open a QList or edit a QList or use the command line to save something to a QList. We've done some tweaks. You can see that there's a little new flag here next to the command line. So if you are a command line user, you'll notice some changes there to make it more predictable and so you can see what exactly you're trying to do. So one of our things, if I go in here and I edit a Q list, let's open up this one. And then let's open up another one too. Let's do that one too. So what we see here is now next to the Q list, in the Q list tab, we've got this new little icon, the green arrow. That means that's the selected Q list. We still use the select buttons that are on here to select these Q lists, but what they mean is when we have a selected Q list, that's the Q list that if I were to do a store action from the command line, that's where that stuff's going to go. So we now have some more visual indication of how things are happening here. And the selected Q list stays selected, even though I'm looking at another Q list. This is going to change and say I'm in an editor Q list and where I'm at down at the bottom. This new button here next to the song, the Q list name, is the select button. So this is basically exactly as the hard key on the console or the soft buttons in the virtual console. That same select button is now present in the editor, so I could select a different default Q list. Another thing that's been changed is when I'm working on Q lists, when I close a Q list, it's always going to revert back to the live tab. So if I close this Q list, we always go back to live. In the past, we used to just go back to whatever the next previous Q list was. And that can cause some issues sometimes if you accidentally make a change to something, close it, and move on to another Q list that you didn't mean to move on to. So predictability is key. And also with all this, this is going to say down here that I'm in live right now. When I'm sitting here at this point, if I use a store command, it's going to store to whatever my default Q list is. So it's going to first go to red and say, hey, I'm going to store. It's going to flash here slightly and say, this is where I'm going. I'm going to song 1, Q3. And by default, it wants to go to the end of that Q list. And that's what my default selected Q list is right here, right now. So if I went ahead and stored that, that's where I'd go. When I'm in a Q list, it's going to say that I'm in an editor right now. And again, it says it's in song 1. And if I open up this one, as soon as I go to a different Q list, it's going to say, no matter which tab I'm in, this command line and editor is always going to follow the tab that's in focus at that time. So no matter what default Q list I'm at, if I'm in an editor, I'm always going to be storing to that if I use the command line or doing anything in if I even adjust these fixtures, it goes in that queue list. So the same time though, I could sit in this queue list, or I could sit in live, and I could say I want to store to list 3 instead, or store to list 1 from here. So I can still store things to these other queue lists using the command line if I decide to. Right. And we also did some tweaking with the super playback when we have it in here. When we're in when we're in playback mode, this will always follow that default queue list. We're calling it a default queue list, which is the selected queue list now. This will always follow what that is. And then when it's in ICPG mode and you have queue list open, it's always going to follow live or follow whichever tab you have open. So again, it is much more predictable how it works. It kind of takes a little getting used to at times, but you'll realize that it's going the way you think it should go. And also in the super playback, we still have the lock function of a queue list in here. So you could lock something directly on here, and then it won't change no matter what selected queue list you're on. So if you have a single queue list show and you want to have it on here, you can lock it and leave it all the time. We did some other tweaking in the timeline GUI itself. We had a little bit more space here. We cleaned up some of the text. We made it a little bit easier to read. Nothing too major, just some slight tweaks there. Also added some new queue navigation shortcuts in this. If you hold the control button and you use your left and right arrows, you can step through your queues that way. You can also use shift to jump to the beginning and the end. If I had more queues in here, it would make more sense. There we go. So shift left arrow and right arrow jump to the beginning and end. So this makes kind of going through and checking your queues quick and easy. This is nothing different than the skip forward, skip back on a queue basis, and also the send the beginning and send the back. Do that. All right. So now we're going to go into some of the new queue list properties. So there's been a lot done in the queue list properties on this stuff. So one of the first things we've changed is we've changed some of the way this stuff works with the fader intensity time. We've changed the names from program to manual, so they're a little different here. We've changed it from fader intensity mode to fader intensity time, so that it makes more sense as to what it actually does. The other thing that also changes is when you go in here and you set these things, it will set the autoplay and release. So if I set this to manual, and let me take this to none first. If I set this to manual, it automatically is going to set my autoplay fade, my fader autoplay to autoplay and release, because it expects that if you're going to have a manual fader time on your queue list, you want it to play as soon as you start moving the fader. So, and vice versa. When I go, if I go to none and then bring this, do this here, and go to autoplay and release, they both play off of each other. So, yeah. So now it goes back to programmed if I take it out of that. And if I take it back to autoplay and release, it kicks back over to manual. So these two work together to make sure that you always have the right setting set. The problem we've had in the past is in order to make certain things work, you need to have a certain combination of parameters. Well, this kind of helps eliminate that, as we know that this parameter is always going to affect this parameter, and things are going to work the way you expect them to. In the timing tab, we have a new function called flash, the flash timing for flash attack and flash dwell and decay. So now you can make your fixtures come up at a certain speed when you hold the flash button down, hold for a certain amount of time, and then fade back out a certain amount of time. You have a fade rate you can adjust here. You also can do this on live timing. So if you want to dynamically play with your times as you go, you can set these to live timing. And I can demonstrate what's happening here when I'm holding the button. I'm just doing a quick click on this. It's just firing that stuff up and it's letting it back down. Now, again, I can hold on it. It's going to hold as long as I'm holding that button, it's going to still hold that dwell. But when I release it, it's then going to go in the decay that I've pre-specified. So fun little things there to have. Makes it very nice. There's also another new QList property in here as well. Let's see here. Called Flash Autoplay. This one you can put in here. It says autoplay next Q after a flash. Should be fairly self-explanatory. So when I hit this, it's going to flash that. Then it's going to go to the next Q and flash. Then I'm ready to flash the next one. So again, I'm in Q1. I flash. I let go. It automatically advances to Q2. Flash. Let go. Q3 and on down the line. So a new QList setting there for that type of thing. We also have a new button that's called Temporary Play. So in this QList right here, I'd have to turn these things up and do that. And, okay, that's not really the look I'm looking for. Let me release that. So now over in our QList buttons, we have something called Play Release. If I put play release on a function, it's going to let me turn it on. Let me do that. And then release it right away. So it's kind of like a flash, but not like a flash because it does something different. So what happens if I can do the same thing with a flash, but when I release it, they won't release like that. They're just going to go off. So nice little extra action there that we can have on our QList. And because that's a button action, it can really be put on anything. And we've also added a new flash action called Smart Flash. And what Smart Flash does is it's a flash on steroids. So when the fader is down, it's going to flash the fixtures up the way it's supposed to. But if the fader happens to be above 95%, when I hit flash, it actually takes the fixtures out. And what it's also doing is it's still respecting the attack and decay times. So it's actually doing it in reverse. The decay is first, and then the attack comes on second. So it makes it for some interesting things, especially when you're using it with the autoplay and release on too. So you could have some creative looking effects doing that type of thing. All right, next up we have some new quick picker, or not quick picker, that's next. We have some new FX multiplier buttons. So in our effects master section for things here, we have new double rate, temporary double rate, half rate, zero rate, all kinds of buttons here. So if I play this QList right now, I've got an effect going. If I wanted to double the rate temporarily, I could hold this button. It's going to make it go faster. You can see the BPM increase. Same thing with quad rate. This is a temporary quad rate. Then I have a double rate here that's actually a latching one. So it's going to continuously double my rate every time I go. Then I have a zero rate here, which basically stops the effect as long as I'm holding the button down. And if I want to reset it, we've got the reset rate, also tap sync, which we've had for a while. But just some more fun buttons to play with to busk your show. And what is running right here is this is a this new button that's on here is the play toggle button. So it's a play and release at the same time. So I click it again and it stops playing that entire list. And with regards to playing in the quick pickers, we have some new options in the quick picker settings for playing the list. So we have a play and then holding blue and clicking will release the Q list. We have a play and release on that, so we can play it while it's held down. These are quick picker page settings. So you can have the same quick picker with Q lists and create copies or do different pages and then have each page have a different set of settings. So in this case, this one was set to flash Q list instead. It's some of the same things. So again, we can have a big touch screen and have lots of different things going on in there. All right. Any questions I need to catch up on before I continue on the next little section of stuff here?
We're pretty good.
All right. Great. Effects engines. We've done a few little new things in the effects engine. Nothing as drastic as when we did the effects masters and the tap effects rate. Some of the stuff we have added is a delete effect button. So rather than in the past when you stopped an effect, it's still technically running in the background. Here's a delete effect if you want to get rid of it completely. We've also added this thing for what's called one-shot effects. So if I open up this cue list, did I open the right one? Yep. All right, hold on a sec. Put up the fader. And let's get this a little bit bigger here. And I'm going to shrink this down because I'm realizing this is looking really, really small. All right, so in here we have what's called the one-shot effect. So this effect right here is in this queue. It's running, but it's set to a single cycle. So if I wanted an effect to run just once, or let's say I wanted it to run twice before it stops, I can set those cycles in here now. The default on all these effects would be infinite. So if I ran it, it would infinitely run. And then I can keep going with that. So by default, you're going to be in infinite, and then you can change them down to how many cycles you want things to do. So again, this is a per effect thing, so you can change it to be whatever you want on all these. Delete button, and also the new preview. Let's release that. List 4. Layout 4. Actually, I don't need to open that. Let's do that so we can see some stuff here. All right, so another thing we've done is when you have multiple effects running, when you click on these effects, you can see the selection order of these effects briefly as you select them here, and then that will go away. So let's do this. And I'm realizing I missed a whole bunch of things about the GUI here too. That's new. This is a good time to say. In the fixture chooser, we've added another couple shortcuts for navigating around the fixture chooser. If you hold your Alt key on your keyboard, you can now turn it into a grabby hand and drag it and move it around. Also, if you have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you click and hold in the center of that mouse, and you can also drag your layout around. So that's one of those ones that I really, really like. But yeah, anyway, back to what I was saying here, the effects. When we select effect, we can see the selection order. These other ones are for different fixtures, but I can see for a little bit of time there how my selection order is done on those effects. And if I click on some of these other ones, I can see that they're coming on there. I can't read any of it because it's so small at this moment. All right. So let's release all that. Let's get back over into here. There's some new inserted commands for the cue list. Just open up a random cue list. I come in here and go into insert commands. We have some new stuff here. Let's see if I can make this any bigger. No, not really. Won't go bigger. At the bottom here, we have, I don't remember if MIDI control enables in the other ones, but what we have here is load super playbacks. And we have a new default option on a lot of these on any of these commands that need to have a target of a cue list. It's always going to be default to this cue list because it's always expecting that you want to have this command fire whatever's happening in this cue list. So now you don't have to know, all right, which one am I in? It's going to go right to that. So load super playbacks is a great one. Again, with if you have multiple cue lists in a show and you want to have a each cue list always jump over on the super playback, you can add this command to the first cue of each one. This also helps with just making sure that you're always pushing the same go button the entire time through the entire show. So Set default queue list is another new one. It's basically hitting the select button on these queue lists. Where this can help is if you're in your playback screen and you have the playback screen set to follow on select. If you have this set to follow on select, that way this will always show, where you are in your show here. Jump in live time. It's jump on steroids. It still jumps to wherever you want it to go. However, with standard jump, it's going to do that over the queue time. And now with jump at live time, if you wanted to busk the show and change your live time dynamically and have those do that, you can. So just some new fun commands to have in there. One of the other big things in here is if you're using audio and you're adding audio to your show file. In the past, we had to always worry about having the correct sample rate had to be 44.1. Now it's auto detecting, so you can drop in the 48K files that you have. It's gonna play back properly and it's gonna work the way it should. All right, let's see. Let me just check, make sure there's anything. If there's anything I missed. So this is kind of a quick rundown of a lot of the features. Well, not so quick rundown, but this is some of the major things. The release notes contain a lot more information on bug fixes and other little intricate features that we've done. There is a lot to it. These are the big ones that we all kind of thought are the ones that grab the best attention. Oh, yep, there is one more here I missed. With fixture profiles, there's been a little bit of work done in the back end as well for naming on LED fixtures, naming the different colors, such as mint green. Some manufacturers call the LED mint green. Some will call it lime green, etc. Here's just lime, indigo, deep red lime. These colors now, in the past, they never mixed properly because Vista didn't know how to interpret the name. So we've done some tweaking on the naming. So now it knows that what lime is going to bring it in and out as needed based on where it's supposed to be. And we have a little better control of generically controlling multiple fixture types at the same time. So it will dial these colors in as it sees fit to make those colors work. So that's one of the nice little other back-end fixes that's happened, part of the fixture library itself and the fixture import process. All right, well, I felt like I went through a lot of that quite fast, but it's not even it's a lot farther in the time than I expected it to be. All right, do we have any questions on this now? Okay, there's all kinds of questions. Let's see here.
Not specific to this
Okay.
release. Media server handling is the same as R2.
Yes. Yeah, going to those the multi-touch stuff. Yeah, the multi-touch is certainly something that's high on the list to continue to enhance as we go. Yeah, everyone wants to use it. I mean, the multi-touch handling, the big one was in just R2 itself with being able to touch multiple faders and move them together at the same time. I don't have a multi-touch screen, so I can't even do that.
There have been some improvements in the touch as well, certainly in the virtual console. If you now touch a certain fader level, it will go there straight away or over lifetime, I believe. So again, like Ben said, some of these things we haven't talked about in this webinar, but when you try it for yourself, you should be able to see some differences.
One of the other little things that we sort of brought up a little bit in the last one is we've changed the color of the mini encoders here and show when they're on and when they're off, because that was something that we couldn't tell when things were on and off. So that has been very handy, little things like that. All right. Well, that about sums it up. If there are any other questions, like we said earlier, for anyone who came in late, I'll just kind of touch on some of the first stuff. Some of the big things in this release are there's a new factory fixture library, so that helps there. Catalina support is now there, even though it was Vista 2 or Vista 3 R2 itself was fine. The dongle driver itself is now in the software. Uh, in the installer package, it detects itself when you first run Vista. So on Macs, you don't have to install that dongle separately. It'll tell you if it's not there, and it'll go ahead and do it. There's also, you don't need the UD512 installer anymore. New USB handling on the back end for all the consoles. So for the S1s and the M1s, there's legacy and the S3s and the EXMVs. They all connect a lot cleaner. Oh, something else that's changed for people with the MVs. The firmware for the MV has been updated so that it doesn't hold the DMX values when you shut down Vista. It will shut down properly for you. So for anybody who's got an MV hooked up to a house lighting controller that's waiting to see loss of DMX, you don't have to unplug it anymore to make that happen. So the MV will shut down automatically. The EX does as well, although the EX had a power switch on the newer one. So all that seems that all of that shuts down cleaner now and doesn't cause odd things to happen. We'll have a new user manual. That will be on the Vista forum with the beta release. Take a look at that. The update is free for anyone existing already. If you have our Vista 2, you can update, no problem. Yes, and as for dongle sales will happen first of next month. And finally, I'll have to say it again, just because I always like to, is don't update right before your show. So give yourself some time to check it all out. I will say that this beta is very stable, and it's very stable because it has taken so long to put it out. We've tested it like crazy. But again, I always like to have some time in front of something before putting it on a show. So
it's also important to mention this is still a public beta, still part of our beta testing round. So for sure there'll be some minor bugs in there as we still work through all of these new features, but that's the whole idea of it. As Ben mentioned, we're pretty happy with it, but we just need to cast our testing net that little bit further on different operating systems and all that type of stuff. So if you do want to download it, we'd love to hear your feedback, and we'll take it from there.
well, with that, it looks good. We don't have any further questions. We're going to wrap this thing up, and we'll have this on YouTube shortly as well. If you care to watch it or want to share it with anybody else. And then head on out and download it and give it a try. Let us know. Awesome. Thank you, everybody.